Nigeria is battling one of its worst floods, with an estimated 500 people killed in 2022. The floods in 31 states of Nigeria's 36 states and the capital city have affected 1.4 million people and displaced over 700,000 people, according to the federal government. The disaster has also destroyed thousands of hectares of farmland, worsening fears of a disruption of food supply in Africa's most populous country. Nigeria records flooding every year, often as a result of non-implementation of environmental guidelines and inadequate infrastructure. Authorities are blaming this year's flood on water overflowing from some local rivers, unusual rainfalls, and the release of excess water from Lagdo Dam in neighboring Cameroon's northern region. The Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency and the Nigeria Meteorological Agency, NIMET, predicted more floods in 2022 than last year due to excessive rainfalls and contributions from external flows such as the dam in Cameroon. Today, we'll be looking at the economic effects of flooding, and to discuss this, we have joining us virtually Prince Will Ezioku, a development finance analyst. Now, before we begin the discussion, we'll take a short breather, and then when we return, the discussion will continue. Please stay with us. All right, thank you for staying. Now, I told you we have Prince Will Ezioku. He's a development finance analyst who joins us virtually. Hello, Prince Will. Thank you so much for joining us on Dateline today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. All right. Now, the last time something like this sort happened in 2012, we saw over 430 people were killed. At least 566,000 people were displaced, quite less than this time around. And then we saw a 2.6 trillion naira, loss, recorded by the federal government at the time. And yet again, here we are, another disaster of that magnitude is happening, perhaps even worse than that, at a time when we are talking about food inflation. What's the expectation now going by this incident? I mean, first, let me get your reaction with the whole thing. It looks like a repeat of history, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. We did very little to prevent this, at least to mitigate. We agree completely, just like your introduction. It's a natural disaster. So of course, but most times certain natural disasters can actually be predicted. We know that during these periods like this, neighboring countries, Cameroon, Niger, and what have you, Ghana inclusive. So most times they release excess flood, and because of where Nigeria is positioned, if you look at the map of Africa, you will see that Nigeria is positioned towards the Atlantic Ocean, right? So most times the water from these countries naturally flow towards Nigeria. So understanding where we are strategically positioned in the map of Africa should have taught us that the first thing we need to do is to ensure that the waterways in Nigeria is not blocked. Now, so that any water coming into Nigeria will have its way down to the ocean. So where we failed to do that, whenever these other countries who are, if I'm permitted to use the word, who are in the hinterland right now, whenever they release water, definitely water will find its way. So if the waterways are blocked, definitely the water will move, because definitely it will have to move. So moving, and of course that movement means entering people's farms, entering people's houses, blocking the main roads. It's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that we are allowing such to happen. Last time it happened massively like this was sometime in 2012. 10 years after, we are here once again. And this time around, of course, with the climate change, is becoming, I think this year's one is even worse than the 2012 scenario. So
Okay.
to me, it's unfortunate that we couldn't do much to avert this.
So the question,
we didn't learn our lessons.
The question that a lot of people are asking is that what happened in after the 2012 flood? Was it that we just moved on? Because I know that there was this post-disaster needs assessment that was conducted at the time that saw even international partners coming together in collaboration with Nigerian government to come up with a report, and certain recommendations were made. But you would tend to think, what happened? Over this period of 10 years that we are having the similar incident happening, with an effect that is even more than we saw in 2012. Agreed, it's a natural disaster, but shouldn't there have been something that could have at least, if not avert, at least reduce the impact of what we're feeling right now?
Yes, I agree with you. But the issue is we did not build the necessary resilience. One importance of natural disaster really is it helps communities to build resilience. But we failed to do that. We did not build that resilience. Okay, there was, I remember vividly, UNDP and some other development partners, contributed, for that post-disaster studies. I think I have seen a couple of them. But the issue is, there is no post-disaster study you will do. I still remember vividly that one of those post-disaster resilience we are supposed to develop is to dredge the River Niger and River Benue. If you River Benue, if you are passing through Lokoja, you will see dredgers. You will see dredgers there. So those dredgers are supposed to deepen the river so that if there is an overflow, the river have enough bank and all the rest of them to flow. But that construction is still there. If you go there, you will still see those heavy equipment there. So we didn't do that. We felt, to me, I just want to leave it at the point that we failed to build resilience. Building resilience means whenever you encounter a natural disaster, you try as much as possible, the firefighting approach, see how you can ameliorate the impact on your people as much as possible. Then, immediately the end of that natural disaster, you proceed with post-natural disaster study. After the study, there will be some recommendations. It definitely, you don't say because the natural disaster have gone. So you need to implement the recommendations of that study. And in our own instance here, one of the recommendations, even if without doing a study, is that we need to deepen River Niger, we need to deepen the River Benue, ensure that their flow path towards the ocean is not blocked. Then we need to also control the way people construct. And you agree with me that why this year's own is worse than 2012 scenario is because of development. There has been more development. People are encroaching on those waterways. Okay. And the more people are encroaching on those waterways, the more, devastating should any flood happen that it will be. So that is actually the main concern. Some of the recommendations, we failed to implement them.
All right. Now, a few days ago, we saw the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development talking about the damage that has been caused, by this flooding, and they talked about 76,168 farmlands that were partially damaged, and then also you have another 70,566 hectares of farmlands that are completely damaged. If you put that together, it will give you at least more than 140, about almost 150,000 hectares of farmlands that have been damaged as a result of this. If you put that as, if you add that to the issue of food inflation that we are dealing with currently, where do you see this going?
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that question. When you include, I passed through Yobe. I passed through Yobe last week. I went to Yobe via Kano. So if you look at the devastation along that path alone, you will agree with me that this study is actually not enough. Now,
so you are saying what the figures we have is even less than what
it's very
has happened.
Modest. Yes, the figures we have is very modest. Now we are talking of, and I'm saying out of experience, right? From Kano via Jigawa down to, you will see what the flooding have done. You will see the maize farms, the millet farms, all of them were submerged in this flood. What are the implications? One, you don't need a soothsayer to tell you that definitely the cost of those items will increase next year. I'm telling you. And it's actually not only those farmlands, what of warehouses that, before now people were storing some of these grains. Now they have been submerged. So that one is also there. Now some of these farmers actually borrowed money from the bank, right, to invest in this farm. If the government does not come to their rescue, they won't be able to meet their repayment timeframes. Hence, the non-performing loan put. Now, we are talking of inflation. When you have majority of the areas that produce some of this food we are talking about being submerged by water, definitely the cost of food, which if you look at the inflation drivers in Nigeria for the past couple of months now, it has been the food index. It has been the food index doing perpetually above the average inflation, cumulative inflation rate. So this, without anything, is going to further push the inflation. It's a pity that we are experiencing this at this moment, but we failed to do what we are supposed to do as at the previous experience. So for me, I would really believe that if there is little or no intervention on poverty, really, more people are going to push into poverty because a whole lot of all these small, medium enterprises that are scattered everywhere, going out there to fend for themselves, a whole lot of them have lost their livelihood. Mm-hmm. Now, a whole lot of there are certain costs that we are not actually looking at. The mobility and mortality rates will actually increase because of the presence of some of these waterborne diseases. If you look at the issue of diarrhea.
Before we go to that, okay. I still want us to talk about the impact that this flooding has had and is likely to have on our economy generally. During the week that this flood happened in Lokoja, we saw the shutdown of the roads, one of the major roads linking the southern part of the country to the north. And here in the federal capital, in the nation's capital, we are dealing with our fair share of the impact. When you see the queues in the filling stations across the city, the queues are back as a result of this. So talking about, transportation, is there another way out of this? Should we have had perhaps alternative routes that could have, help in making sure that deliveries to the capital territory, whether food deliveries or whatever, reaches the nation's capital?
Okay, thank you for that question. Because naturally, when you have natural disaster, flooding, to be specific, one major impact is always supply chain disruptions, because and when you come to this context we are discussing, you see that because Lokoja Abuja Road is a very is a very important, is a critical road as far as this country is concerned. When that happened, the Minister for Finance, what I could have been fuel supply scarcity in this city. What they could have done is to provide an incentive, right? There is alternative roads. So if you're coming from Lagos to Abuja, you mustn't take Lokoja. You can actually take Mina. That is via Suleja and that rest of them, Mina Aziz. I've taken that road where you pass through Futa. Of course, the road is bad. I remember in 2021 or 2022, I walked somewhere in Mina, so I passed that road via former President IBB in front of his house. You move down to Temkwara, if I'm correct.
But you know, there's likely to be pressure also. There's likely to be pressure also on that route as a result of the shutdown of this other Lokoja route, don't you think?
Yes. What I'm saying is that at this point in time, we have federal road safety. We have quite a number of them, right? Theirs is to move. In an emergency situation, you bring out. That's when in advanced countries, that's when you see their soldiers. You remember sometime in UK when something like this happened. The soldiers were even the one ferrying diesel fuel. Sense is that we had a whole lot to do at that point in time, that the Lokoja route was no longer passable. The federal government could have come up with an incentive for tankers. If before now, you just monetary incentive. That is where I was expecting the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to come in. So imagine saying, okay, for cost of movement of diesel from Lagos to Abuja, the government will pay for that. Automatically, you will know that so many people will start moving that route in order to move fuel. But be as it may, the government failed to do that. So we still have another opportunity. The opportunity is, at this critical point, there should be support. See, natural resources are expensive. Natural disasters are very expensive. So anytime it happens, you have to go all out. And that is why do not capture it in the budgetary as a budgetary provision. So for me, we need to look at, I watched a video where some of the people that were trapped, in Lokoja and in the other country, in other states, they are crying for help. So the question is, what is government doing? Government need to move those people. Yeah, so it's very important.
All right, Prince Will, we're going to take a short breather now, and then when we return, we'll continue to discuss this issue. Please stay with us. All right, thank you for staying with us. If you are just joining, you're watching Dateline on Trust Television, and we are talking about the impact or the effects of the recent floods, unprecedented floods that we have experienced here in Nigeria. And I have joining me via Zoom, Prince Will Eziukwu, a development finance analyst, who talking about sharing his own perspectives as far as this is concerned. Now, Prince Will, what do you think are some of the hindrances to our responses to these emergencies when they do happen? Why? I mean, usually we see early warning signals issued by NIMED, and sometimes when these intelligence or reports are released, we do not get to act, proactively before these disasters do happen. So what are some of the hindrances, or affecting our responses to this?
Okay, thank you for that. So for me, I think it has to is a systemic thing, because we actually had a very good intelligence that something like something like this was going to come. But the question is, what did we do? To me, I stand to be corrected. We did little, very little, because the warnings were not there. As in, the warnings were not. If the warnings were there, we could have treated it as a crisis situation, right? We should have treated it as, even when the water levels were rising, nothing, very little was done. Luckily for me, personally, I passed that Lokoja road 2 weeks ago. less than a week, and this happened. So life was just normal. So the signs people did not understand. A few days ago, I was actually data. We could have informed people, at least settlers like those in Lokoja and all the rest of them. We could have advised them. People will move, people will relocate, go out with their goods. So the destruction would be very minimal. But to me, this looked as if people were taken unawares. For me, as a government, it's important that this is another lesson. We have another opportunity, right? To, in honest, ensure that we build our resilience.
All right.
It's important.
Okay.
The reason is not all about experiencing it. We've experienced it. But what do we do after this?
Afterwards.
Is we need to learn how to prepare ourselves. And preparing ourselves. Thank God, the major disaster, natural disaster we normally have here is flooding. Okay. Really, we don't used to have earthquake and what have you.
All right,
so we need to prepare for that.
Let's look at other dimensions to this and what we can do. I mean, we already have a rising number of cholera outbreak in the country prior to this disaster.
Definitely.
And this is likely going to also lead to outbreak of, other diseases as a result of, the kind of water that, people are going to be taking and all that. So what do we do post this disaster? People are in IDP camps, sheltering there. But aside providing relief materials and all of that, some of these houses have been in water for days. So the integrity of some of the buildings have even been compromised. It's likely that we are going to see now building collapse, following this disaster and all that. So what do we need to do to avert more disasters that could come as a result of this?
Okay, all right, so let's it's a chicken egg relationship, but let's try to start from the beginning. The first thing we need to do going forward is we need to identify constructions along waterways, right? We need to start clearing those waterways. Let's give the water, let's allow the water to have its way. Definitely, that's the first thing we need to do. Now, secondly, there should be support. There should be support. These people, that a whole lot of them, their source of livelihood have been destroyed. The Nigerian government must be prepared. Governments, both federal, state, and local government, must be prepared to support these people. I was discussing with someone a few days ago. I said the problem of this is not just that your building was, flooded. The impact is that even your sockaway, right? The water level have missed the sockaway with the normal level, with the normal water, right? So you can't really tell at this point in time. So wash facilities, if you look at all the IDPs they are creating, I'm not seeing strong wash facilities. And those things should be there, because if they are not there, there will be crisis at our hand. So provision of drinkable and clean water is very important at this point, because so many of the waters have been contaminated. That is the issue. So government need to ensure that all the IDP camps, the first thing they need to provide is good water and sanitation facility.
All right. So
before you even talk of other ones.
But you know, all of these things will cost a lot of money. You know, if you talk about clearing the buildings on the waterways, you have to have some kind of compensation for the owners of those buildings, isn't it? So
yes.
Where do we source the money from? Is this money being budgeted for? And does it also speak to the issue of the Climate Adaptability Fund, you know, that the countries have talked about and all that?
So thank you so much. I wrote a paper, I titled Economic Waste, the Tale of African Economies. And we are not poor, but we failed to manage our resources judiciously. Now, with all these discoveries about illegal, crude oil pipelines and all the rest of them, these are resources that we should have used at a period like this. Be as it may, we've also lost that critical junction. At this point in time, you don't need to budget. What you need to do at this point in time is to communicate down to National Assembly for provision. Really, you need it. Because if you fail to do that, I tell you, we will spend more, trying to fight fire. For me, it has nothing to do with we don't have money. What we need to do at this point in time is some of those access, some of those funding, some of those expenditure heads that have little or no immediate benefit. In State House, procurement of more project vehicles, they are good. But at this time around, we have crisis in our hand. And my people used to say that a man whose house is on fire does not chase after rats. So we need to prioritize ensuring that the waterways, ensuring that we pay compensation, ensuring that we actually get our people back to their feet again.
All right.
Before we talk about some of these other costs. Okay. At this point in time, our main expenditure head should actually be to, get our people back to at least to the level they were before this flood.
All right. Thank you so much, Prince Will Eziukwu, a development finance analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on Dateline and sharing your perspectives with us. We thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
All right. And that's a wrap on Dateline for today. In case you have missed, you can catch up across all our social media platforms. Also, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch us live 24/7. My name is Ayuba Ilya. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.